Hello, welcome back. This is the second part to the basics of setting up an FMC, flying an aircraft and landing it. Okay, the landing will not be pretty, I will tell you that for right now. However, this follows on directly from the first video, which is we've set our FMC up. Okay, it's all ready to go. I may be clicking through buttons or switches that I'll tell you what I'm doing, but it's not 100% necessary to fly the aircraft. It's just a routine I've got into to do. Okay. So for our FMC, we're going to click next page until we get back to magenta. The magenta one basically is where we are at the moment. Okay. For that. Now, we now need to set the aircraft up to the way we want it to be. Okay. Let's go back up here. As you can see, it's slightly there's slight rain outside. It's not the best day in the world. This is using the weather engine from X-Plane 11. There are lots of weather plugins that you can use. What I will warn you about now is, unless you have a very high spec computer with lots of memory and a very good graphics card, weather plugins will destroy your frame rate. Okay, I'm just warning you now. My PC is high end in terms of playing lots of different PC games and simulators, but X-Plane 11 is a different animal altogether when it comes to reality and how close you want things to be to being reality. It costs a lot of money, which I alluded to in my first video, is this game could easily destroy your bank account if you let it. So anyway, we're still with the Zibo 737, we're still exactly where we are in Glasgow, and we need to be ready to take off. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm going to change this back to the map. I'm just very cautious that I have used up fuel in my first video. I don't want it to run out, that would be a terrible thing. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to set up what we call the MCD, which is this top section of the cockpit. Okay, we need to switch flight director on both sides. Okay, and you'll see that it's confirmed above the horizon. We need to select auto throttle, arm. We then need to select VNAV and LNAV. Now VNAV and LNAV are your vertical and your longitude navigation. If you do not have these switched on, the aircraft will not follow your flight plan. These must be switched on. These 3 switches and 2 buttons need to be switched on. Okay, so flight director for the pilot, flight director for first officer, and your LNAV and VNAV need to be switched on. Okay. We also need to put in our cruise altitude, which I'm trying to remember off the top of my head and I can't remember it, so let's go back into our sim brief, and if we scroll all the way up to the top, it's 27,000 feet. Okay, so let's need to put this up to 27,000 feet. And this is us telling the aircraft this is your cruise level, this is your maximum altitude you're going to. The very next thing that you need to do is you need to tell the aircraft that altitude for pressurization, which is up on the overhead panel. On the right hand side here, flight altitude. We need to select this to whatever altitude our cruise altitude is, and I'll tell you why in a second. So 27,000. If you have this selected for 0, you get above a certain altitude, whether it's 15,000, 20,000, you will start blacking out and will crash because the cabin is not pressurized. That is when I said earlier about a routine. As soon as I set my altitude on the MCD, I set my altitude on the pressurization so that I know there's not going to be any blacking out. I had so many flights where I have blacked out because that's not been set. Okay, that's aircraft setup. It's everything we need to do at the moment. Okay, so what we're going to do while we finish off what setups we need to do, I'm going to select a pushback.
Ground to cockpit. Plan acknowledge. Call me through the menu when you're ready.
Plugins are a completely different kettle of fish altogether. So I
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
I will do that in a different video. I don't want to muddy the waters. I want this to be as straightforward as possible. Okay, so there's our tug, just appearing. He will drive through the building. It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about that. Okay, so the Zibo mod, which is a 737 aircraft we're going to fly today, it has a checklist you can download. Okay, the checklist is very good because regardless of how much of a routine that you use for with this aircraft,
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed. Ready
you might forget something, and it is very easily done. So there are numerous ways of doing the checklist. Okay, you have here on the tablet checklist and procedures. Okay, you've got your engine starts, etc. You'll see that says 1.3. If you hover your mouse over the edge of the tablet and click, you have all of this. Okay, so all you need to do is you can click take off and you can make sure you've got all of this done. Put a tick in a box just to confirm that you've done that, if that's what you want. Okay. Okay, release park and brake. Park and brake is this button here, and if you zoom in it tells you that. Okay, so that's how they're going to push us back. Okay, so checklists is quite important. There's a file here which is also the checklist, and this is pretty much the exact same as what the download you can get. All you need to put in is, you know, X-Plane 11 Zibo checklist download, and it will be probably the first one that you see. To get rid of this, you just click up at the top to stow it away. Okay, so while he's pushing us back, the views, the numeric buttons on my keyboard, the number pad, I set up to have the views I want. So the view I have at the moment is my pilot view. If I want to go to overhead, I just press one button, it takes me to the overhead. If I want to go to the throttles, I press another button, I'm at the throttles and flaps and everything else. Okay, to set up a view, a custom view, the arrows on your keyboards move your position from left to right, up and down. Once you have a position that you're happy with, you hold down the control key and then press the number key that you want that view to be. So this view is number 7. All I did was set this view up, hold down control and press 7 at the same time. That means every time you press 7 in this aircraft, it will go to that view. Okay, so it's reasonably straightforward. These are just little tips that I found when I was looking to try and set myself up with this aircraft and other aircrafts. Okay, it just makes things easier. Okay, and yes, okay, a view might not, like my overhead view only shows me that, but if I move my mouse about holding down the right mouse button, I can then see other things as well. So it's handy to have. Okay. I'm not going to talk about plugins. That can be in a different video altogether. This is purely just down to setting FMC up, takeoff, autopilot, descent and landing. Okay, I think what I'll do for this video is we'll take off, we'll get to our cruise altitude, and then before we come to the descent, which is your top of descent, if you watch the first video, your top of descent is when you start descending for your approach to the runway. The FMC, the aircraft, will tell you all of this. Is not something we need to worry about. Okay. The guy in the tug, for some reason, is deciding that he's going to push us and pull us in all different directions. If we look at the FMC, let me talk a little bit about it. The FMC, this is your waypoint here. Okay. Each one of these is a waypoint that the aircraft is going to fly to. This number before the / is your speed the aircraft is going to fly at. So 240 knots all the way, it then goes up to 282, or is that 262? 282. After the / is your altitude. If it has an A beside it, it means you need to be above that altitude. What is he doing? So we need to be above 5,000 feet before we reach this waypoint. Now you'll notice that this waypoint has an altitude of 6,000, this waypoint, and then we increase our altitude. Okay, to set park and brake, we just click on that and the light illuminates to show that it's lit. Okay, so if it has 0.77, sorry, if it has a point and then a number after it, that's a Mach rating, M-A-C-H. If it has just numbers, then that's the knot rating. Okay, you don't need to worry about it. I'm just telling you what it is. Okay. Now I've flown out of Glasgow lots of times in this simulation, and I know that it gets stuck at 6,000 for quite a while. You'll see here the distance. For this waypoint it's 0.8 nautical miles. For this waypoint it's 11 nautical miles. This one 2 nautical miles. So we can travel a distance before we can actually start climbing. I'm not using ATC and I'm not using anything else.
Cell is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time and have a safe
Thank
flight.
you. Okay, so I want to clear this altitude and I want it to be climbing. As soon as we go past this waypoint, I want it to start climbing up to the 27,000 feet. I can manually change this. You can manually change that, you can manually change the altitude. So to change it, all we need to do is /. Remember in the first episode I'd said anything before the /, you just put the details in, the number in. Anything after the /, you must put the / first, okay, for it to determine what value you're changing. So we're going to ask it to try and reach an altitude 2,330 for that one. Now you see it says MOD for modified, and we've got the yellow light and the execute. Okay, we also have unable to cruise altitude. That's fine. You can ignore that. Okay, we can just clear that. It goes away. Press the execute, and you'll see it's now changed. So as soon as the aircraft gets to here, it says to itself, right, okay, I need to be above 5,000. 11 nautical miles from here. For this one I can try to reach that. It's not going to reach it, but it means it's just going to continually climb. It's not going to plateau at an altitude and then climb. It's just going to climb constantly. Okay, now we don't want it to try and dive down to 6,000 feet, so we're going to change this one as well. 233 /233. In here again, modified, yellow light, execute. Now, that's us going to be a steady climb all the way up to our 27,000 feet cruise altitude. Okay, these numbers are when we're descending and the different waypoints we need to be at with altitude. Okay, it's just something to bear in mind. It's not something you need to do. It's just that I know from my experience of this simulator at this airport, it doesn't need to sit at 6,000 feet for 15 miles. It can just continually ascend to its altitude. Okay, a couple of things I need to switch on. They're not particularly important because I'm not using ATC and things like that, but it's just things that I do. Right, okay, so I am using a joystick and a throttle. It's a Cytec X52, X52 Hostess. Okay, I wouldn't say it's the best one in the market. It's quite expensive for what it is, but its functionality is enough for me just now. I couldn't justify spending a lot more money on something just now. So, okay, to taxi, because I know this airport, we're going to go up and turn right along the taxiway all the way to the end of the runway, and then we're going to take off. Okay, so I've got a button mapped to release a park brake. I've got the throttle lever for the throttle. So what we want to do is we want to travel about 20 knots along the ground towards our runway. So that's what we're going to do. If we look here, this is our thrust, and I want to basically have the white line round about the 4 for 40% until we get to about 20 for the ground speed, and then I'll back off the throttles back to nothing, and then we can travel along the taxiway. Okay, so I'll release the park brake and bring the throttles up to about 40. Keep an eye on the ground speed, and we'll taxi along. When you turn right or left in an aircraft, you lose speed, obviously because of friction and gravity and everything else. So it's something to bear in mind when you're taxiing. If you're having to do a lot of left and right turns, just keep an eye on the throttles. That you're going to have to possibly increase throttle, increase thrust and decrease thrust. The view I have at the moment is specifically set up from a YouTube channel that I watch a lot. It's called Flight Deck to Sim. So FLIGHTDESK 2 Sim on YouTube. The guy that has the channel is basically an actual Boeing 737 pilot. And please don't ask him what airline he works for. He's never going to tell you because he doesn't want to. So don't ask him. It's quite a rude question to ask anyway. So the reason I brought that up is the view he has set up is a view that I've set myself up here. Now you'll see on the wiper, just left of the wiper, there's a little block sticking up from the cockpit. So I know if the yellow taxi line is round about where it is at the moment, that my front wheel, my nose wheel, is on the line. Okay, and again I say that's just moving your arrow keys. Once you've got it where you want it, press Control, hold it down, and press the number button on your numpad, and that will be the view you have every time you press that button. So it's very straightforward, but it's just something to bear in mind because it's difficult to try and visualize where your nose wheel is, because you're obviously sitting left center of the aircraft. So this, and when you're coming into land, this helps as well. So it does. We're losing a little bit of speed along the taxi, so we're just going to increase thrust again until we can get to about 20 knots, and then I'll release the thrust again. Right, that's us about 19 knots. We're not that far from the end of the runway now. The runway's on our left hand side. The end we're going to is 23. And a useless fact for you is there's one runway in Glasgow, but it has 2 numbers attached to it, the same as every other airport in the world. Different airports may have multiple runways. Each end always has a number, and I didn't know why. And I thought I'm going to look it up because, well, I'm quite boring that way, that I would want to know why. And it turns out the number represents the heading. Now the heading for runway 23 is 229, so 23 is a reference. The runway at the other end is runway 5, so that's 50, a bearing of 50 degrees. There you go. If it ever comes up in Trivial Pursuit, then there you go. You know why runways are numbered the way they are. Right, this is us approaching. Normally we would stop here, we'd ask for clearance from ATC. I'm not going to do that. I don't fly with ATC. I don't fly with any ATC at all, because I'm still learning. I don't want to try and do, there's a program called VAT Sim, which is basically real world people who are acting as air traffic controllers, and I'm not experienced enough or competent enough in any aircraft to basically to be able to become communicating with people about where I should be heading. So I'm not doing that at the moment. Technically we would probably go up to where that line is with the arrows, but I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to set the parking brake. Now this is purely just procedure, what I'm going to do next. You do not need to do this to fly the aircraft. You do not need to do it, but I am doing it just because it's part of what I do on a daily basis with aircraft, okay? I'm setting the timer, so I've got a rough idea of how long I've been flying. I'm setting the speed brake to RTO. Then I'm going to go to the overhead panel, switch engine starts to continuous, put strobe to steady. I would have had these lights on had I been concentrating on what I was doing rather than trying to describe what I was doing. And we're going to put the flaps down. Oh, I nearly took off without flaps being set. So I've got a button set on my joystick for flaps, speed brake, etc. It makes it slightly easier, especially when you're coming into land. There's so many things you're trying to concentrate on. Having a button quite close to where your hand is a lot easier to do. Okay, so we have the flaps set, we have the flight director on, we have the auto throttle on, VNAV, LNAV are on. We're pretty much set to go. Now, you can manually open the throttle up, open the thrusts up, and run. Remember earlier on the first video, we set the FMC, which has told us I think it was 97% thrust. You can manually operate the thrust levers to go to either the 100 or the 97%. You do 100 or above, you're going to blow the engines up. Okay, so it's not a good idea. On here, this is a runway and this is a heading we're going to get to that Norbo star. Nearly forgot what it was there. However, if you want to do basically an autopilot thrust, remember we've got auto throttle set here. There's a button on every aircraft which is TOGA, which is take off, go around, which basically means if you've set up your FMC properly, the aircraft knows what thrust setting to have. Okay? The button on the Zibo 737 is this button here next to the mic. You press that, the thrust goes forward until it reaches 97 point whatever percent it was, and it will stay there, and it will become an auto thrust straight away, rather than manually having to set your throttle, especially if you don't have a throttle lever attached to your joystick. If you're flying by a keyboard or by a mouse, that button will be your saviour, because you don't need to worry about your throttles. Okay, it will do it automatically. You still manually have to fly the aircraft, but the throttles you don't need to worry about. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. Right, okay, I've got a button mapped for the takeoff go around button, so I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to release the park and brake, press TOGA button. You'll see this lights up here, which tells you that it's now in takeoff mode. Up to 80 knots, you want to put some forward pressure on the stick and use your nose tiller to keep the aircraft on the centre line. Okay. Okay, and I'm just about to fly off the runway. Positive rate. Okay, I'm going to put gear up. I want to go left.
400.
Now, at 400 feet, we can activate autopilot. I'm going to fly this by hand for a little bit. Trying to keep on the magenta line.
1000.
Yeah, try and keep it on the magenta line. Flaps are up, gear are up. You hear the throttle throttling back. To set autopilot, you need to press this button here. CMDA. See how the aircraft automatically then banked slightly to get onto the magenta line. It is now flying. It is now operating vertical and horizontal position, and it's auto throttle as well. Okay, so as long as you have these lights lit up, you should basically be sitting back watching the aircraft fly. That's the theory, and I hope the theory is correct, because this is an amazing simulator. Now, there are plugins, and I said I wouldn't talk about them, and I'm not going to. I was going to mention one, but I'm not going to. If I mention one, then I need to mention all of them. I'm not. Okay, so we're now climbing through the clouds. We're not going to see very much at the moment. What we can do is, if we have a look on the tablet, Avitab. Okay. You can actually log charts and airports and routes into this tablet, which will give you the exact same information that I showed you earlier from SimBrief and SkyVector website. Okay? Have a look at the map, and it will actually show us where on the map in the world we are, and it will follow us. We can use the mouse wheel to move it to scroll out, and we can actually scroll all the way out as well. Okay, I quite like that setting. I quite like that zoom. You don't really use this map for guidance. This map is more for a reference point for it. I just like it. It gives me a little bit of a reference point as to where I am and what I'm doing for it. Okay, anything orange on these screens is not a good thing, and you'll notice here that this is now orange. Okay, so we need to set that to a standard, and to do that we just press this STD button here, which is standard. Okay, and it changes to green. Need to do it for this one as well. This is, if every screen blacked out, you could still fly the aircraft with this. This is the basic gauges that you use for any aircraft, but it's a backup plan for the rest. I need to go over here, and again you see this is orange as well, so we need to set standard. That basically is an altimeter setting. for Glasgow it was 29.92, but once you're above a certain altitude, so I think it was above 6,000 possibly, we want a standard altitude, as in it doesn't really matter. A standard altitude is obviously a standard altitude throughout the world. So we can see the aircraft is now banking left, and it's heading towards Norbo, Norbo, which in the first video was our first star that we were trying to reach. So that's what the aircraft's doing, it's flying to that. As long as you have a solid magenta line here, the aircraft will follow it. If you have a broken line, the aircraft will not follow it because it is not set in the FMC, okay? Now you see there's an FMC on both sides, the first officer side and the pilot side, captain's side. They are separate, but basically they are linked, i.e. anything I program on this side will show up on this side, okay? And you see we've got 33 nautical miles to NGY, and we're going to be reaching a speed of 0.772 Mach, and our flight level will be 27,000 feet. Okay, so the aircraft is following this to the letter, to the very letter. Okay, you can see we're now at 14,500. We're at a speed of 0.54, or if you want to say it in knots, 277 knots. It's showing LNAV and VNAV speed and N1, so it's using the takeoff thrust of 96.3%. As I say, you never want to get 100 and you never want to go above 100. Your engines will just blow up. Okay, so like I said, there's a lot of buttons I clicked that you don't actually need to worry about. It's not going to crash a plane. It's not going to ruin your FMC plan. It's purely just down to I click these buttons, I do it in a set procedure because that's what I've learned to do from the checklist. And I dare say I've probably forgotten some, but in general that's what I want to do. If I want to be more immersive, I need to be able to fly and program the aircraft, and I still don't feel confident that that's what I'm doing. I just know that this works. Okay. If you're like me, if somebody shows me to do something, I need to know how it works so that I can understand why I'm doing it. Okay, but I can't do that unfortunately because I don't have the experience of knowing every single thing about the aircraft and every button and what every button does. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Maybe in years to come I might, but this is why. I hope I'm trying to explain it properly. I hope it's going to be some help, because I know that 15-20 hours that I spent on this simulation drove me mad. It's just so complicated, and every plane FMC is different. The Airbus FMC is different to Boeing, but because this is not a default Boeing plane for X-Plane 11, the 747 is the default one, its FMC is slightly different, which can just be so confusing. So I've taught myself FMC programming for Boeing 737 for the Zibo mod, and I've also taught myself the Airbus A320 FMC. It's a different nature altogether. So it's a different aircraft, so it's going to be different. It handles differently, it programs differently. Yeah. So it's the same as if you had one car, you jumped into a different make and model of another car. You know, your wipers and indicators might be in different sides of the steering wheel, or you know, yeah. So it's just different. Okay, so let's have a look at our flight plan. You'll see here TC, T/C, which is your top of climb. If you watched the first video, the top of climb is the top of your cruise altitude. Now you see how it's moving away from us. basically because we're not going to reach 27,000 feet by the time that TC reaches our triangle. Okay, so this is our aircraft. That's 5 nautical miles, 10, 15, 20. Okay, that's the bands. You can change this by this rotating knob here, and as you can see, it's still moving. Okay, so once it realizes it's there, wow, there's actually not much time between top of climb and top of descent. This could be interesting. Normally cruise is 25,000 feet for this flight, so yeah, this could be very close. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'll leave it here just now, because again it's another fairly lengthy video, and I will do my next video, which will hopefully be the descent and landing. Now it may be a longer video than this one. I think it would become too disjointed having a video split from approach to descent to approach. If I was watching a video of how to do something, I would want more of a fluid feel about it. Okay, so we've covered the basic setup of the aircraft. We've touched on the very important button of takeoff go around, which is basically your auto thrust for takeoff, etc. Takeoff was horrible. I obviously almost ran out of runway because I was veering right. Part of that is, and I'm not making an excuse, I am a terrible pilot, but after 80 knots, your nose wheel it becomes ineffective because the wind at that speed is trying to lift the nose off the ground, so your nose wheel is useless. You now need to use rudder. I don't have rudder pedals. Okay, I have a button on my joystick, but it's on off. Okay, so yeah, it is what it is. Landing is going to be the exact same. If we have a crosswind, I may end up landing off the runway. But instead of spending another 40 hours trying to master a perfect takeoff, perfect landing, I want you to see what an absolute amateur can do, and then improving that. This is just an information. This isn't me saying, I'm really good, or this is how you should fly. No, I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is this is the basics of how I found how to program and fly, and then let you take it from there and then go on and do great things. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you do like the video, you like content, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button. If you have constructive criticism, please do leave a message. If you just want to moan and complain for absolutely no reason, then please just go and find somewhere else to do it. Until then, until the next video, take care, stay safe, and speak to you soon. Bye bye.